Awesome. All right, well, let's just jump in then. All right, so we're going to talk about pre-visualization and the use of it in Marvel's Spider-Man, the E3 cinematics. I actually did both of the E3 cinematics, the one that launched the game, the initial one where it was Mr. Negative in a helicopter, and then this larger one where we're introduced to the Sinister Six. And then we'll talk a little bit about fine art and how I use it in that. So who am I? My name is Joshua Gridley, and I have over 17 years of experience in the film and video game industry. I've worked as an animator, pre-visualization artist, post-visualization artist, supervisor, lead, all sorts of departments. And here's some of the films that I've worked on throughout the years. I'm also an artist and a creative coach. Go. So there won't be sound for this, so if anybody knows the sound, you can just make it for us. And I think this is kind of where the E3 one ends. I don't think we actually see Dr. Octavius. But as you see, it's a pretty large scene. There's a lot going on. I obviously did the entire scene, but that's kind of what was just for the presentation itself. So what is pre-visualization or previs? So I define it as previs or pre-visualization is a method of visually conceptualizing a production. And the goal of it is to create a roadmap for departments. You want to, when you're working on production, there's a lot of departments that have input into what you're creating, and often in animation it becomes the bottleneck for everything. And so pre-visualization bridges the gap between all departments. You're putting everybody on the same page so that they can visually see what you're creating and know how that their department can cater to the overall story and to make it better. So your goal is to make it as clear as humanly possible so there's no guessing as to what people are going to be doing. So why would you use previs? Couldn't you just use storyboards? And storyboards are amazing and they're super useful, but they also have limitations. For one, everybody reads storyboards differently, and the pacing at which you read a storyboard may be different than the next person. You may read it fast, you may read it slow, you may be pausing on something, you may be moving through that action itself. So here's a good example of storyboard that these seem pretty straightforward and relatively easy. But when you jump into the game world, you're working within a game environment, the game engine itself. You can't cheat things like you can in film. And so this tower here, for example, this water tower, like this may seem super simple. Spider-Man lands on this water tower and swings off. Great, whatever, everybody knows. But the problem is, when you get in the game world, the likelihood that this water tower is in a location where you could actually see buildings in a vista and then jump down and have these fire escapes is highly unlikely. You're gonna end up trying to cheat your scene, which you can't do because you're working in a real world where a person goes to play and then suddenly there's a water tower floating in the air. This also, the composition can be cheated. This is a good example of a storyboard that we actually did previs for, and we had real world set photography that the storyboard artist was then able to use our stuff and create a storyboard that looks almost exactly like what they used in the actual film itself. Because you're working in a 3D space for previs, you're often given real world coordinates and sets. Like if we were going to do pre-visualization inside this auditorium, we would know the exact measurements, where we could have a camera, what kind of limitations we have, if we need to take out a wall, what we are going to do. So for your production, it makes it way easier to know and to plan ahead of time, and that way you can actually get something that works for all departments. So where do you begin with previs? For me, I start with the script, and if you don't have a script, I'll make my own. I'm not a writer, but I'll write a basic treatment of what the scene, the shot, or the shots are about, and I'll begin to plan it from there. And you want to have some kind of written thing because you're trying to think of what's the point of what I'm creating and how am I going to convey this to the audience. Also, you start to think about how you're going to visually tell the story. From there, I'll gather reference and I'll start to kind of put together I make like a folder of everything, or like a Pinterest board, and I'll start putting anything in there. It doesn't have to be specific to what I'm creating. Sometimes it'll just be random things that I think are cool, or video clips, or still images or whatever. And then the next thing I'll do is I'll go for a walk. And this to me is one of the most important aspects of creation. If I have a week to create a shot, I'll spend basically my first 2 days just walking around. I don't sit at the computer. I don't sit there and try to animate or create anything. I sit and walk around and I visualize everything that I'm creating. I start to play it back in my head and create little movies, thinking about action scenes, fights, story moments, what I'm gonna do. This way I can kind of begin to edit the process, and I can kind of think about this way more than just sitting at the computer working with models and moving things mindlessly around. I get to like really plan it out. And then keep it simple. When you first start, especially when you're working in 3D, it's easy to want to make everything overcomplicated and do cool camera moves and action and whatever. But if you think about it, the viewer only has a split second to read what you're actually creating. And so you want it to register in their brain. And what is the most simple, clear way of telling that story? And do that. It may not be your end result. You may change it. But if you start from a simple method like that, it will work far better and you won't become overcomplicated. So my first pass, this is kind of a good example of this scene. I got basically a script that said, the Sinister Six show up in some kind of cool cinematic manner. They beat the crap out of Spider-Man. They throw him in the water. And that was pretty much what I had. There wasn't anything telling me how they show up, wherever, what part of the raft they show up in. And so I'll take that and I'll do little tiny thumbnail storyboards. I'll print off the script page and I'll do little tiny thumbnail storyboards all around the outside of the page. And they're only about the size of a quarter. I'm not really worried about the drawing. I'm just more so worried about composition, how I'm going to tell the story, and starting to think about actual moments of the scene itself. And from there, I'll go and I'll take my kind of initial ideas, and then I'll start to just try to find more reference images. Maybe I look for comic book poses, whatever. So I'm gathering more reference. Here's some of my reference from this scene. I really like this kind of cool pose. It always reminds me of like the cowboy like smoking a cigarette. I kind of thought that would be a nice one for Electro. And on this scene, when I first started, Marvel wasn't really involved, but as it became an E3 scene, Marvel became more involved, and so they started giving me more reference poses and things that they really wanted to see within the actual scene itself, poses that they wanted me to hit. So I had a bunch of this stuff, and I just kind of, throughout my day, I just kind of flip through it and kind of just get my brain going and think of like how I could maybe work into these poses. So once you have storyboards and some ideas, what do? So for me, I scout the environment. I obviously had an environment for this because this was a game asset. And so go inside of the scene itself, move around, orbit around, camera, like you're a helicopter, moving around. Like, because my scene could take place anywhere outside of here, there was no specific spot, I really just kind of scouted everything. Like, would it be cool to shoot it down here? No, it'd be probably pretty lame because when Spider-Man gets tossed in the water, he's falling like 25 feet, and it's kind of anticlimactic. And so finding cool location, planning that out. You also want to keep things in mind as far as what do you know in the story? Do you have a script already? Where are you coming from in gameplay? Where are you coming from in the movie? What's happening before and after this? And this, I knew that Spider-Man was going to be chasing Electro in gameplay, and he was going to lead you somewhere, and then the Sinister Six are going to show up in some kind of cinematic manner. And Spider-Man gets his butt kicked, and then he's thrown in the water. So my thought process for this, I start with the characters. The characters for me in this situation were the most important. And so I break down Spider-Man. Spider-Man is ultra powerful, he's smart, he's super cocky, he has super sense, and then he's cocky. He is actually super cocky though too. The Sinister Six, they need to surprise him in some kind of manner. So I started thinking like, how can the Sinister Six surprise somebody that has a super sense? Like, how do you sneak up on somebody that can sense everything? And then I needed to put him in a situation where he couldn't just swing away. Like, how lame would it be if they show up, they're gonna beat the crap out of him, and he just webs to the roof and just takes off, and then it just becomes another chase. So how do I put him in a situation like that where he's handicapped? And so I think about what are the weaknesses of him and what are the weaknesses or the strengths of Electro. So for me, the strength of Electro is his electricity and the ability to traverse through electricity, and then his power is obviously electricity. And Spider-Man, his weakness is his ego. And so with this in mind, I've wanted to set this up as a trap. I wanted Electro to lead us as a player to some kind of location that would be a trap. I wanted Spider-Man to think that he's getting the better of Electro, but really he's leading to a place. And so for me, I started looking at these towers, and I saw that there was these kind of towers all around the top of this. I didn't know that this was actually going to be raining when I got the scene. It actually helped out a little bit more. But my initial thinking was that, okay, Electro can use his electricity to trap Spider-Man. Maybe he takes him up at the top and he creates kind of like an electric wrestling ring around this area, and Spider-Man's trapped inside. The Sinister Six show up, and then basically you're released to gameplay and you have to fight these guys, and you're not able to beat them at all, but you get that moment of, oh, next time I'm gonna beat them. Obviously it changed, but that's what kind of led me to these locations in my initial thinking as far as like what I was gonna do and how I was gonna create. So I'll then make like kind of a crude map of what's gonna happen. So this yellow line is Electro's leading you. You go inside the raft here, there's some kind of like cinematic moment, and then you go up this elevator shaft in gameplay, and then you swing out and you're gonna end up here at the top. So then I'll take my storyboards that I created and I'll begin to refine them. I'll start to open up the actual environment and I'll scout around and I'll find my kind of camera angles and plan things. And at this stage, I'm kind of planning my screen space, how I want to lead the eye, how I want this scene to be filmed. And I knew that I wanted this to, as a player, I wanted you to feel like you were Spider-Man. Like you're in this situation, you're actually getting to fight these guys, and you're gonna get your ass kicked. And so I wanted to have a lot of continuous camera angles, a lot of continuous camera movements. And for me, my favorite cinematographer is Roger Deakins. And so I was looking at a lot of his work, and he started off in documentaries. And so I kind of wanted to keep something like that. He uses a lot of wide angle lenses and really takes you as a viewer to the action versus using longer lenses and kind of bringing the action to you. And so I had that in mind with the initial thinking. So I've done all this work and I haven't even been in the computer yet. And so now I'm gonna begin in the computer. I'm gonna start laying it out for previs. So at Insomniac, we were working in Maya. You could do this in any software program, it doesn't matter. But I began using the camera sequencer, which is almost like Adobe Premiere inside Maya. So you're starting to cut your shots, you're starting to think about how long shots are, what kind of beats you're gonna use. I start playing music at this point. I'll start listening to soundtracks of movies and trying to think of what the overall pacing is gonna be, how fast I want things, how slow I want things to be. And this helps me figure out kind of my cuts. And I'll set each shot up with one camera. So this scene in the end was about 69 shots, and I had like over 100 cameras in my scene. And the reason I'll use one camera per shot is it allows me to explore and figure out angles, and rather than being tied to a specific camera and then popping to a next shot. I'll also leave a lot of padding in between my shots, meaning if my first shot goes from frame 1 to 10, my next shot won't start on frame 11, it'll maybe start on frame 100 or 1,000. And this way I'm able to come back in later on and add more shots in there. I'm able to modify, move things around without having to like shift stuff. For me, shifting animation is super annoying and I don't like doing it. I also keep the animation super simple at this point. I'm just focusing on the overall movement of things. I'm not really even focusing on keyframes at this point. Like, I'll maybe put a few keyframes in there, key poses, but it's mainly just overall pacing, movement, and the readability of the edit. And also, don't be afraid to scrap your work. I did this scene 4 different times, like almost start to finish, having a scene that was completely fleshed out, but it didn't cater to what we wanted to achieve for the overall end result. And so I threw the work away and started over again. Always start your scenes in a way where it can be modified. You will never not have to modify a scene. Like, it's very rare that you won't get notes on something. So set it up from the beginning knowing that things are gonna change. Like for me, I'll put all my animation on a locator, my cameras, my characters, everything. That way I can move it around, because you never know, like I could plan out this whole thing on this rooftop and I'm like, this is the greatest idea ever. And then the director comes in and is like, oh yeah, this is cool, but I want it to take place over here. And so this way I can move everything easily. I can rotate it, whatever. I'm not having to move a bunch of stuff, break things. And then, like I mentioned, the shot padding and a camera per scene. And then also thinking about how you're gonna tell the story, what lenses, what style of shooting, how you're gonna do that. And then search for more reference. For this, like I was mentioning, Marvel was giving me reference, but I was also searching for my own for poses. One of the hardest things of this scene, outside of the actual scale of it and the complexity of the scene, was the violence aspect and creating violence. And I was initially directed to make this as violent as humanly possible. And it got to the point where they were just like, this is disgusting, let's pull back from here. And so it was easy to pull back once you've kind of gone too far, instead of just kind of inching forward and trying to make it a little bit more violent. But what I realized from my research was that I was watching a lot of like kung fu movies and different fighting and these kind of crazy martial arts moves, but to me they felt too fantastical. Like, yeah, they were cool, but I can't do any of these moves, so I have no relatability to anything that I'm seeing other than like, oh cool, that's a cool fight move. But it didn't feel violent. And so I started watching like kids fighting in high schools or people being beat up on subways, that kind of stuff. And to me, that felt ultra violent, because I could imagine myself standing there and somebody kicks me in the back and suddenly I'm on the ground, somebody's kicking me. Like, that put me in a different headspace. And so I knew that that's kind of what I wanted to go with for this violence and how I was gonna move forward. I'll then make like a camera map, and I'll just do like a top-down drawing of the overall scene. And this way I can plan like where the Spider-Man is, how he moves, where my camera is, how I'm gonna introduce other characters in here. And I can basically plan out the entire scene easily without having to spend a lot of time inside of Maya. I lost my clicker. Okay, sorry. Anybody have any questions? Yeah.
Have you ever worked on a long one shot where the camera doesn't cut, and when like that was like a director's choice, not your idea, where you just had to have this long shot? And how do you approach like, how much do I focus on the camera, how much do I focus on the character when you have a long cut?
Yeah. So almost everything that I create, I start with a long cut, with a single camera. So like I was mentioning, I have like 100 cameras in there. I'll basically set up my camera in a way and I'll run the scene for as long as I humanly can in that angle, maybe just panning, tilting, but just keeping it relatively stationary outside of that. And I'll see what I can get from that. That way I know, like, okay, I need to cut, I need to emphasize here and there. And it makes it easier, I think, to plan stuff. But with all of the single long cuts and that kind of stuff, you want to think about it in real world dynamics. Like, how are you going to be filming this? Are you filming it like on a monopod? Are you filming it with a cameraman that's got like a big camera rig? Is it going to be on a drone? Is it a helicopter? What is it? So actually think about the real world equivalent of it and how that would make things different. Like, if you have a big camera rig on your shoulder, they're pretty heavy. And so if you had a character that was moving around a lot and you're doing pans, your camera's not going to be focusing on the character that much. You might be overshooting stuff, trying to find the shot and going back from there, versus having everything be clean. And that's going to make your stuff more realistic anyway, if you think about like the real world. No, not yet. Was it next question? Did that answer your question?
Another part of the question is like, when you're doing, I guess this actually works for like you do in different camera angles, you almost always, I expect, are animating from the perspective of a camera. So do you work on like a whole sequence without a camera?
Yeah.
Before you do all the camera work?
Yep. You don't want to be cheating stuff. So if you animate only to the camera, you're often going to be cheating stuff. Like, I'll give you an example. When I was on Bolt, I was doing fixed animation, and I got kicked this shot where it was like the cat mittens, like walking. It was a simple shot, and the animation looked incredible. But then when they put fur on it and ran simulations, it was exploding, and they couldn't figure out why. And so the first thing I did was like, I went to the perspective view, and it turns out the body of the cat is here and the legs are like down the street. And the person was just animating specifically from that camera itself. And like, they were cheating everything to like work in that angle, but in reality it wasn't. And so you run into issues like that. So you want to think about it in the real world. Like, don't cheat things. Like, unless you have to cheat it, like how the storyboard of Spider-Man on that water tower, like if you have to cheat it for a specific reason, then go for it. But always try to think about the real world equivalent, and then thinking about your camera secondary. These were just some of the camera maps. So as you can see, those was shot for them. Let's skip through some of these. So long scene. All right, so after the initial setup, this is kind of what you're asking about. It's a dance. Like, you're basically, you have your action takes place and then you have a reaction. So you want it to feel realistic to the person. Like, if I kicked somebody, I don't want to just like kick them and then I wait for action again and then I go to the next thing. Like, if I kick them, I'd be going in for another kick or a punch or whatever. And so when you're creating something, you want to think about that. You don't want to just think like, okay, I'm filming it here, this is happening, and then, oh, and then this guy's going to come in. It's like somebody's always doing something. They're not just like waiting around for something to happen. And so thinking about how this moves stuff and thinking of it exactly like a dance. Like, how is this going to lead to this, and then this leads to this. So for this scene, really I just had to plan the entrance of Spider-Man meeting Electro, Vulture coming in, Rhino, and then the background you see Mr. Negative. But once I had that kind of initial setup, the rest of it just kind of led to itself. It's like, okay, now we have some dialogue stuff. Cool, I'm going to have some orbiting cameras, kind of amp up the intensity here and make things stressful. And then it's like, okay, who starts this fight? Okay, Rhino's going to charge in, and Rhino's charging in. While he's doing that, Vulture's going to fly in. What are these guys doing in the background? And so everything kind of led to a thing happening and a thing happening. This is also where you can start to nerd out with the subtext of shots. Like, I love thinking about the subtext of shots. Like, when I started the scene, Spider-Man, you notice when he lands on the roof, he's taking up almost the entire half of the frame left. Electro's little tiny dude in the background. And Spider-Man, with his cockiness, he thinks that he's already won this fight. So he enters, he's really big. He's like, oh yeah, I got this. Electro's miniature. As the scene goes on, Spider-Man loses his screen space. He becomes diminished throughout all of this, to the point where he's crawling on the ground as they're following him. They're towering over him, and he's a little ant at this point. And so thinking about that stuff is going to make it much more rich for your viewer and how you're going to tell the story. Are you going to use like lots of Dutch angles to make things feel uneasy, or what are you going to do? And here's some advice from a legend, John Knoll. Do any of you know John Knoll? You guys use Photoshop? You know Photoshop? So he's one of the creators of Photoshop. He's one of the top guys at Industrial Light and Magic. And when I met him, he was visual effects supervisor on Pacific Rim. And I thought it was awesome because I had the privilege of talking to him for a couple minutes, and he was very passionate about this. Like, don't ever cheat your previs. What I was telling you, don't cheat your work. And he was working on Pacific Rim, and he had a big visual effects shot. It looked awesome in their previs, and then they get to set, and it turns out everything has been cheated, and he can't figure out how to film it. And he has 200 guys standing around trying to set up the shot and figure it out, and they come to realize it's all been cheated, and so he has to sit there with paying 200 people to sit around how he's going to film this thing. So keep that in mind when you're creating your work. So how do I use this now? This is my fine art, and obviously it's vastly different than anything, but my process is still very similar. I still go out into nature, I scout things, I work really small in little thumbnails, and then I'll take that and I'll scale up. Like this little tiny 3-inch drawing became this massive painting. And I don't have to worry about 24 or 30 frames anymore. I just have to worry about one frame. And it's similar because with 24 or 30 frames, you still have to tell a story and make it as clear as humanly possible. But now I have to do the same thing, but just one frame. And all my planning is basically the same. I go out into nature, I sit there, I hike somewhere, and then I post up and I'll sketch. I'll take in my environment, I'll scout my environment, find my best angles, and then I'll play with the compositions, the drawings, and then I'll get to explore my shapes, my colors, my patterns, how I want to invite the viewer on an adventure through this landscape of something they've seen, but how I can take them through an adventure looking at it through a completely different lens. So if you're thinking, I'm not creative, I don't know where to start, I'm not an artist, hit me up, I'll teach you. This is my Instagram, this is my cell phone, and I also have a free guide here if you want 3 simple, quick exercises on how to tap into your own creativity and to find your own creativity. We're all creative. Some of us just somewhere along the line get beat up by somebody that tells us we're not an artist, we're not creative, we don't know how to do this. And I'll teach you exactly how I went from not creating at all to regularly creating. In the past 2 years, I've made over 70 paintings, and I've been very busy, and I'm very passionate about teaching others and helping others. I was very fortunate to have amazing mentors along the way, and I feel that it's my duty to give back to others, and I like to see everybody embrace their own creativity. We were given this gift for a reason, and I believe that the world will be a better place when we share our creativity with others. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming, guys. I really appreciate it.